Thank you so much for listening to Paper Girl Podcast. Before we get into the episode with Samantha Ryan, I would like to give a brief content warning for suicide, mental illness, and grief. If you find those topics activating, I do recommend that you skip this episode, but I do still think you should read Samantha Ryan's other works, including Pride and Words My Friends Have Thrown Away. Thank you for listening, and now here's the episode. Thank you for listening to Paper Girl, a podcast for readers, writers, and creatives. My name is Melodie. I'm the host, the owner of Meadow Market Books in Tulsa, and a writer myself. I'm here today with author Sam Ryan, who is a Tulsan and has published some of my favorite books recently. How you doing, Sam?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. You were actually the first author that I asked, and then I said, wait, I need to get Jess on here because we've got an upcoming event. But when I thought about authors that I wanted to talk to and kind of pick your brain about your process and your inspiration, I thought Sam's got to be on here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. And definitely I'm excited about Jess's launch for her book, Side Quests and Shenanigans. So excited about that.
I love it. We're going to have the Jess counter. We talked about you a lot.
I listened and I heard.
Episode. And we'll see if we can get a Stephen King mention in here too. So your most recent book is These Are Not My Final Words. So let's go ahead and talk about final words.
Yeah. How sad do you want to be? Also, I should ask, what is the explicit warning with this?
Go for
what can we say? Okay. Because that's always something I need to ask too. How sad do you want to be?
Let's be sad.
So this book is like an exploration of grief. I think when I wrote it, my goal was to look at it it was really to me Jace's story. The book is about two friends and we meet them right after one has committed suicide. So in my mind, it was really Jace's story of mental health and depression and suicide. And then we get to see the aftermath of that through Jace and what he has to deal with. And since I've put out the book, so many people have commented and messaged me about how it helped them experience loss in a way that kind of surprised me, because I think in my mind, it wasn't about the loss part of it as much as it was about the mental health and the depression part of it. And so I was really kind of surprised that when you put out a book like that, like everybody can take different pieces of it from what they need in their own life, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, I think it probably just from getting to understand mental health and how having declining mental health and dealing with very heavy things impacts the rest of your life. I think despite this being a book about that, people find ways to cope with their own grief by recognizing, oh, this person was really hurting and I need to address how I'm dealing with that so that I don't follow a similar path. So I think it was really powerful in that regard. And, I also think that it found a lot of opportunities to make me laugh, which was really nice.
Yeah, I love absurd humor. So in the book, the grief is kind of manifested in the imaginary character that they created for a TV show. So both Jace and Johnny are writers, TV screenwriters. And so their TV duck appears to Johnny at the funeral, and Jace voiced the duck in the TV show. So when he's talking to this character, it's really him talking to his dead best friend. So the opportunity that I had with an imaginary animated duck was so endless, because at first I'd never written a non-human character, but then also he's not real. So he really could do whatever he wants. And there were so many times where I'd be writing, there's a scene where Dick is the duck. He likes to pretend like he's killing people in very interesting ways. And one time he pulls out a knife and just walks up behind somebody to stab them. And I'm writing, I'm like, whoa, Dick, calm down. What are you doing? Just realizing that I could make him do whatever I wanted because there's no consequences for him because he doesn't exist. And so that was a lot of fun. It presented a lot of unique opportunities that you wouldn't really have in other novels.
Yeah. Can you tell me how Dick came about?
So that is, unfortunately, I don't keep good enough notes. I don't remember. I know at one point I have a note. I'm a pantser. I'm not a plotter, which is bad. I need to get better at actually writing out outlines. But I have one note and it's like, TV show, duck. I don't know why that is what stuck. And then at one point there was, because he's a detective in the TV show, there's one point where he has a partner who was like a goose, and the goose got cut at some point. So I don't know why birds, it was just birds for some reason. I think in my mind I pictured it as like a BoJack Horseman type, where they're animated animals but also very anthropomorphic. So I think that in my mind it's like they have bird heads but then potentially like more human bodies. I'm not sure.
I love it. I think it was a really great avenue to show people like how talking to someone helps. And even if it's, taking a moment to take stock of how you would talk to the person you're missing can be really powerful in the grieving process and in the healing and moving forward. So I thought it was fantastic. It was not what I expected. I read an advanced copy of it and I had it on my Kindle. And when I opened up the first page, I started doodling all over the title page, and there's like hearts and flowers and happy faces. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait, because I had read Pride, which is very much a hearts and smiley faces. And, I tell people all the time when they pick it up and I'm like, oh, you're going to love it. I kicked my feet. I audibly gasped and giggled. And I happened to get like one weirdly misprinted copy where like 40 pages got shifted right as the characters are confronting their feelings about each other. And so I ran to my audiobook copy to get caught up, because I was like, I can't miss a second of this. I think I consumed it in one night, but it was this very intense and very positive and happy. And so I was ready to dive in, and then like 2 pages in, I was like, oh shit. Yeah, what have I done?
The first line of this is, final words is, the show starts at a funeral, comma, I guess. And so like, I wanted to be like, hey, this is what it is. Like, just drop it right there. In the makeup of the book, each chapter is an episode of the show. So I kind of wrote it because they're TV show writers. So it's like season 1, episode 1, and then they all have titles, and so they're like TV show episodes. So I kind of wanted to bring in that screenwriting aspect of it. Do something. I feel like that's a easy avenue to show how Johnny looks at the world. That's kind of how he views things.
I love that. So coming from that screenwriter's perspective, how much experience do you have with screenwriting?
So originally, before all like middle school through high school, that's my goal was to be like a director. I actually wanted to go in like animation. And so all through that, I was like looking at film schools. Like I was very convinced I was going to go to LA and go to film school. And then in high school senior year, I read As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, wait, hold on. I was like, wait. Because what he's doing with words, I had never seen before. And then like it just became this deep dive of the teacher that I had was a great English teacher. She was like, well, if you like this, you need to read this. If you like this, you need to read this. And just going down this path. And then from there, it was very clear of like, oh no, I think I want to write books. So in this book, there's actually a chapter that is a screenplay, and it's written in screenplay format, but in like a joking kind of a way. And I do think I would eventually like to write screenplays, but I don't have a lot of experience with it. I think that's one of those things that like you really have to be in to understand really well. And I've spent so much time studying the craft of writing fiction novels. So I don't know how much of that would translate because it's so completely different. But I do think eventually I'd like to study it enough to feel like I could maybe explore that.
So we've talked a little bit about like the mechanics of writing the book and a little bit about the journey, but I would like to know, if it's okay to ask, what specifically inspired you to write about grief and mental health?
Funny story. I have a friend, she hates when I tell this story. I have a friend who we were talking. I have depression. I also suffer from suicidal ideation. And I think that that's something that people don't like to talk about. But we talk about it openly enough to where it's like we make really bad jokes where if people heard what we were talking about, they'd be like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you guys? But clearly it's like we view it in that kind of absurd, funny kind of a way. And I remember we were having a conversation about it one night. And it was very much like I think when you have suicidal ideation, you have this like guilt that you carry with you of like knowing that if you did this thing, that it's for you, but then you would hurt all these people around you. Like you're aware of that. And I think I was talking to her, like trying to convince her of like, you wouldn't be responsible for what I do, that kind of a thing. And she was kind of like, no, I know that. And I think the realization of knowing that someone could understand what you're going through to that degree of like, cause we've been friends forever, and knowing that that's like the path that you've had to deal with and the understanding there, I thought that was really significant to me. And that's why I think when I started writing it, again, in my mind, this story is about Jace. Even though he's not even present in the book, he's passed by the time it starts. It's really his story of like, we get to see, because we go all the way back to them in college, we get to see pieces of their lives where Jace and Johnny have done this for so long together. And whether or not it's healthy or not, I think in a lot of ways it's probably not. But just the understanding that those two people have, having gone through this. And so I felt like it was that kind of interesting. I think like in a lot of times when in media, when suicide's portrayed, it's used almost as like a gotcha sometimes. Or like at the end of a story, it's like comes out of nowhere where you're just like, what is this? Where I wanted to show the day-to-day kind of dealing with it, of what it looks like when you have good days, what it looks like when you have bad days. And so, and kind of the parallel too with Johnny is depressed after Chase dies. Like he is then going through these things that he has never had to deal with personally. And I think that gives him even more perspective of what Jace has had to go through by going through these stages of grief. So I think that was part of it. That happened. That conversation is what started the idea of these two people being together. The other half of it is I was very fixated on art after someone dies. I think recently, especially with like AI, we've seen instances where people who have passed away have had their likenesses used, their voices used, potentially not with their consent. And this idea of like when someone is gone, how does that change the presentation of art? Like for instance, in Star Wars with Princess Leia after she passed, and they used her likeness in so many ways. So whether or not that person is involved or not, in this case, Jace passes, they recast the character to sound like him. So then you have someone creating art that imitates this person who's passed, which I think in that sense is kind of just a weird idea too. And can that art still be the same thing that he created? Once you've passed that point, does it still mean the same thing? And so I think I kind of wanted to explore both of those two main ideas, like what happens when art is separated from the creator.
That's fantastic. I've been holding on to this like thread of starting off the book telling us that Johnny's dead and how he died. I think is such a soft space to explore the idea of suicide in a way that I think I've never read in another book. How we get this out of the way and you know it happened. And I think that's the beautiful thing about like when we talk about children's literature. And these are not my final words. It's definitely not a book I would put in a kid's hand probably until they're a teenager. And then I think at a teenager would be fine. But all that to say that when people are concerned about adult themes in children's books, is that literature is a way to explore the unfamiliar and the uncomfortable in a very safe way. And we talk in library school and in circles of library professionals about what a kid can handle and why a kid might reach for a book about drugs or depression. And it's that they recognize that it's fiction, that this thing can't actually hurt them. I can read this book and explore how a family member would react if I died without having to die, and to know that reading this book, I have not died, but this is how the people around me would feel. And this is what would happen to my art. And I think that that's a really gentle way to explore the grief, but also for people who suffer from mental illness to see what that's like and really come to terms with how to address it and how to take care of themselves. And so I think you've really landed on something really special with this book. And so
I think that's also why I write queer books. And I think that's also why I love writing queer stories, particularly queer stories of people finding themselves or seeing themselves. With Pride, it's like a late bloomer where one of the characters comes out very late in life. And I have had people message me saying, this is my story. Like, to see myself reflected on a page healed me in this way. And like, to know that, because to me, that's what stories can do. That's the power of stories. Is like, once you share that, not only do you feel a little lighter, but then knowing that you get to share that with someone else by them consuming the art is what I think is so special about, especially queer literature. And that's what makes me so mad with book bans, because a lot of times kids don't have the opportunity to see someone on a page that looks like them or sounds like them. And that's why I think it's so important for queer kids to have access to queer books, because that may be the first way, the safest way maybe even, for them to explore what that looks like in their own life without feeling the judgment of people around them, especially if they're in an unsafe environment.
Yeah.
I wish I had those books when I was a kid.
You know, I think that's, not I think, I know that's specifically what drew me to Jess when she was selling Mean Piece of Water and Alien Invasion, was when I was talking to her about them right before we paid. She was like, these books feature queer kids, but the trauma and the big bad is not that they're queer and how people are reacting to that. It's just that they are queer characters and they're doing this and they're having this adventure that has explorations of queerness, but never in a light of, oh, how are people going to react to this?
She always makes a joke about, she writes great parents, and like, I write awful parents. I write very, very sad, sometimes scary. I just finished a novel where it's like the parents are just the worst. It's like this very toxic family relationship. And so we always joke whenever we're tabling together, it's like, no, this is the healthy version, and mine's like the super toxic, scary version.
Like, how can I make this person like an absolute caricature, to explore how, if like this is the worst that could happen.
Yeah. And then buy Jess's book and then read it afterwards so you can heal from that.
Then you can see this is the best that could happen.
Yeah.
And if you're a parent, this is the best way to react and see how your child flourishes.
Exactly.
I love it. So I want to talk about Pride because, you know, they both hold like favorite books of mine in different genres for sure. And I'm a big romance reader. So let's talk about Pride.
Yeah. Yeah. Pride, I have had in my mind for a while, obviously, because I'm a huge Pride and Prejudice fan. But I love the opportunity to take something that everybody knows in a way. Like, everybody knows the story, right? You pick up a version of Pride and Prejudice, you know what's going to happen. It's not like a surprise there. But then how you can mold it, especially in modern ways. And like, I read a lot of fan fiction as a kid. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I read a ton. That was my first even, which is ironic because the queer fan fiction started with Kirk and Spock. And that was my first foray into queer anything. And so the idea of like, what if we took this and then got to see it presented in a queer way? Has always been kind of in the back of my head. And then once I started writing it, my Darcy and my Bennett are not like beat for beat who these people are, but I didn't want them to be. To me, it's not as interesting if it's an exact copy. I wanted to take the essence of what the story was and then present it in a way that was new and different. And so, and like, one of my favorite interpretations of Pride and Prejudice is Bride and Prejudice. Have you seen this? The Bollywood?
I have not.
It's so good. It's got great music. Highly recommend. But it's these ways where you're taking this kind of, this concrete idea that everybody knows and then turning it into something that can be explored in a very fun way. And so that's what I kind of wanted to do with this. But once I started writing it, I love Ben and Avery so much. They were so much fun to write that once I was done, I was like, well, I don't want to end here. I don't want to stop. It's too much fun. So they will come back. I've already written a book. It's not about them, but they are in it with another writer.
Oh, I love that. So Pride is set in Tulsa. Is this new book set in Tulsa?
Yes. So actually, they're everything that I write is connected. So even Johnny lives in the same world that Avery lives in. So this one that I've just finished, it's called Jim McQuan is a writer, and she's coming back to Tulsa. Her mother lives here. And she's been tasked to write a book with Avery. And so it's her and Avery together, trying to figure each other out and learn each other. But I think it's what the fun part with this for me was that Avery at this point, this is post-Pride, so he's kind of become a different person in a lot of ways.
Is he using his pen name still?
He is, yeah, for marketing purposes, because you can't just change. But he then is now these two people that are public that he hasn't been before. And so I think it was really fun. It's more focused on Avery, I think, than it is. Pride is very much it's Ben's point of view. It's like his story. This is a way that I kind of got to tell more of Avery's side of it, which I'm really excited about.
That's so exciting. Do you have like a timeline for that? Or?
I don't. So it is finished, and it went to my agent, and then we came back with edits. So we're doing the revisions right now. So
Love it.
Yeah.
So Jess is very much trying to stick into that, like edit one thing while writing another. Is that how you like to operate, or?
I'm kind of chaotic. I will do I'll do edits on one while I'm writing another, while I'm trying to, like, I don't ever want to not have something going, which is very scary right now because I don't have anything lined up, which has put me in a very, like, anxious position. But my goal is to always have, like, the one that we're working on production while I'm editing another and then writing another. So, yeah, got to get them out.
Pumping them out. So the work of yours, there's two works of yours that I'm the least familiar with, although one was a very quick study. So you have A is for Andy, which was a collaborative effort. I'm not a Real Housewives fan, so I was like,
it's a very niche book.
Who is Andy? I was like, because my brain thought Andy from Parks and Rec.
Okay.
And then I looked at the cover. I was like, well, that's definitely not Parks and Rec Andy.
No, it's Andy Cohen. I'm a huge Real Housewives fan. This is the problem. When the more you spend time in creative spaces, the more you realize that you really can just do whatever you want to do. And so I had this idea. It's like a children's book, like an ABC. But it all goes through, like, A is for Andy, which is Andy Cohen. B is for Bravo, Bravo, fucking Bravo. Just Real Housewives of Beverly Hills reference. So each page, it's animated like a little kid's book. And I don't know. It was just something that was in my head. And I was like, hey, we should just make this. It's self-published. It's me and my friend that did it. And she did the art for it. And it's just like a little fun thing that we did on the side. I don't promote it as much as I should, but it's so specific that I feel like if you don't know Real Housewives, you're not going to have any interest in it.
Yeah, people pick it up and they're like, what is this? And I was like, a Real Housewives thing? I was like, but Samantha Ryan is awesome. And so if you aren't a Real Housewives fan, you have options here.
The reality is it's a bit that I thought was funny, and then I made it. And that I get in trouble because I go down that path because, like, I think it's hilarious. And then people should probably start telling me no.
Yeah, like, no, well, I have access to self-publishing software and free time to do something. And so I think
of the bit, I'm going to commit, and then we're going to create a whole book about it.
That's art for art's sake. And I'm into it. And then Words My Friends Have Thrown Away, which that's through Siam.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, that when after I'd finished writing a novel, I had writer's block. I didn't have any projects lined up or anything. And I was really just wanting to do something more for, like, art's sake that wasn't a bit. So what I thought was, because I went to school, I went to TU for creative writing, and we used to do writing exercises all the time that would just force you to focus on the more constraints you put on your writing, I think the more you force your brain to operate in a specific way. And I think, to me, that's always how I've gotten through writer's block. So I thought of this kind of, it's almost like found poetry kind of idea, where I posted on social media asking people to comment just a word, and that was the only parameters I gave. Just comment a word. And so all these people, including Jess, she gave 2 words, y'all, which is one of my favorites in the book. They just commented either on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, of just like one word. And I write a lot, and I read a lot. I had to go look up some of these words because I didn't know what they meant, which again was great because it's like you're given this starting point, and then you kind of have to jump off wherever your brain goes. And you have no idea where they were wanting to go with it. They have no idea where I was wanting to go with it. And so we kind of created these pieces. To me, we created them together without them knowing what it was. And like my mom, she's got a great sense of humor. She commented on my post and just put words. She gave me words, and like 10, 20 times. So hers is the first one in the book. It's words. And then I wrote a little piece about words. So all the pieces in there are like 500 to 1,000 words. I think the longest one is maybe 2-3 pages. But it was just me taking that starting point and then creating this piece. And they're all little lenses of queer identity. So some of them are like people who haven't come out yet, people who have been married 40 years. And so it's just like different little quick vignettes of like queer life. And I had a lot of fun with it.
I got to flip through it. felt tricky to track down, and then Dolly from Siam came and brought a bunch of items from their press, and so we got to put it on the shelf, and I was like, all right, now I can look through it. And then you've written a little bit of horror,
Yeah.
a little bit, and to the point that Jess thought you were a horror writer.
I know, she tells that story. It cracks me up. Because that's how we met, was through Fish Gather Listen. And so she was the editor in that. And so I think she thought that that's just all I did, and she says that as though she doesn't do the same thing. She's a genre collector, so she jumps around a lot as well. But I think in my mind, I don't do a lot of horror. I enjoy horror, but it's sometimes genre can be so specific to the setup that it's difficult to get into unless you're practiced in it. And so that's why, like, Final Words is literary. Two of the things that I've written since then are literary. I don't know that I'll go back to romance either. But like with horror, it's like, well, it's a challenge if you're not into the structure of it. So I thought, well, I'm going to challenge myself to write this because I knew it was for a horror anthology. But even like she had mentioned, the story itself is not super scary. It's again about grief. It's about the loss, someone who's lost their father. But it's more about just the fear of yourself, I think, can sometimes be as great as anything else out there.
I love that. Yeah. Are there any other projects you want to talk about, or?
Yeah. So like I don't have anything that's lined up for production right now, which is a little frightening, but the book that we have on submission at the moment is about puppets. And I'm so excited about this book. I want it to be out there so bad. But it is a Comic-Con. I'm a huge fan of Comic-Cons. And so I had this idea at one point. I was like, what would happen if the book takes place at the con? So it like starts Friday and Sunday. It's just 3 days of us being hyper focused on this couple. And the first day of the con, the husband asks the wife for a divorce. And so they have to put on this public-facing relationship that they've had for 20 years, while in the background, their relationship's falling apart. And I kind of wanted to explore this idea of like, what happens when it's not like there's some huge infidelity or it's sometimes relationships just end. And what happens when we witness that end, when they're trying to pretend like that's not what's happening. And so I really love the book. It's a great book, and it's on submission right now. So fingers crossed that hopefully within a year or so, it'll be somewhere
on the shelves.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about you as a writer and as an artist, and now I kind of want to shift into like you as a reader, because I've yet to find a writer who isn't also an avid reader. So, where did your reading journey really start, do you feel?
Certainly that's my parents. I'm very grateful. I think in pride, I even say in the acknowledgments, like, you created a reader, which then created a writer. So my parents would take us, I've got 3 brothers. They would take us to the library like every other Saturday and kind of just let us go loose. Like, find your books, sit and read. And so we were very much all the time we were at libraries. And so I feel like they just encouraged us so much to read on our own. I loved reading in school. And so I feel like all through school and everything. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the English teacher who was like, you need to explore this. You need to explore this. Like, I think every writer has readers in their lives, but I think also specifically English teachers who are like,
Yep.
who see what could be there and be like, you need to keep going and push and push. And I'm really grateful for all teachers, really, but specifically English teachers for doing what they do. And so I think definitely the love of writing came from first a love of reading.
I love that. Let's talk we've met in person at the Magic City Author Bash in 2025. That was our first in-person interaction. You want to talk a little bit about like interacting with Tulsa's literary scene?
Yeah, I think people are surprised that there's such a big literary community here. There's a huge arts scene here in general, but really there's so many connections to literary ideas and figures. In college, I went to the University of Tulsa. The archives that TU has is incredible. The James Joyce Center is here. A lot of his archives are here. We've got the Bob Dylan Center and all of those archives here, which is also connected to Woody Guthrie, who has, incredible poetry. So I feel like there's so many huge figures that have Tulsa connections. But then you drill down into the authors that are here and that are writing. I think especially like for the queer community, there's a ton of queer writers here in Tulsa. And I think that for a lot of us, it's like this small act of defiance to be in the buckle of the Bible Belt and then producing these works that are, potentially always being threatened to being banned or being, censored in some way. Like, I want so badly to have a banned book. This is another bit of mine. I'm trying really hard. I really, I was in the process of developing a Ryan Walters drag queen child's book.
Oh, yes.
And I couldn't get it out fast enough before he left. I was very upset, but I'm glad he's gone. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I really want to have a banned book because I feel like the mentality here, if people would put aside these preconceived notions of what they think this is and get to meet the writers and the authors and the artists and the poets and the drag queens and the performers and all these people face to face, it's like you're missing so much. It just makes me so sad that there's so much culture here in Tulsa that people are completely oblivious to because of what they've just been fed to repeat. So I think especially when you have community pride, when you have all of these events that we have, what Jess is doing in the poetry community, those are ways in which it's just like pure queer joy in a lot of ways because we're able to exist even despite what the community around us thinks or feels.
I love that. Yeah, they really are just missing out on so much joy. Even it hasn't happened yet, but I'm just anticipating someone picking up pride in me telling them how wonderful it was and how feet kicking, giggly smile it is. And then they look at it and realize that it's two men and then make a face. And it's okay, but if you have that attitude, you're missing out on something that will make you have such a visceral, beautiful reaction. And you're doing that because of this notion that of hate and anger. Mm-hmm. And it's that's exhausting.
I can tell when I'm at events when someone walks up because I also have very openly queer marketing. The stand that stands on the With for Pride says, my book is gay and cheesy. I want people to know when you walk up, this is what it is. I don't want anyone to be surprised that they pick this up and then they get mad because it wasn't what they thought it would be. I want you to know going into it what you're getting into. And there was one event that was not a queer event. I do a lot of queer events, but one that was not. And the lady next to me had a book that was very overly religious. And not that there's, obviously, I'm totally fine with that. I was more concerned that she would have a problem with me, if we're being really honest. But she was super cool and chill. But we're sitting there. We weren't selling a lot of books. Neither of us were selling a lot of books. And so she kind of looked over. She was like, I want to buy one of your books. And she buys it. And then she starts to read it right there in front of me. I'm like, oh no. I got so nervous. And I was like, all the thoughts in my head are what's going to happen if she's she gets mad or she's like, how dare you? All this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. It's fine. This is what this is for, right? The whole point is that we're trying to, reach across and create relationships and all this stuff. So we leave. We come back. It was a 2-day event. We come back the next day. She was like, I stayed up so late reading this book. She was like, how do you have such good voice? How do you sound like a gay man? She was so sweet. And so we hugged, we exchanged information. She's very, very sweet. And so things like that, where it's very reassuring of sometimes my preconceived notions are also unfounded. But I feel as a queer person, you automatically have to be guarded in a lot of ways. You don't know what's safe.
Very
and so
protective.
I feel I try to explain that a lot in Pride of until you're reassured that someone's safe, your default is that you have to act like they're almost not because you just don't know and you don't want to take that risk. And so I do feel there have been opportunities with Pride that have allowed me to form relationships that I think were kind of unexpected, which I think is great.
Oh, I love that so much. We've got folks trying to come in.
Oh, no.
1 hour.
Just tell my guy.
In an hour. But yeah, I wanted to shift back into talking about reading because I shot you back into being an author, and I was just thinking about the way queer women write great MLM romances. All of my favorite MLM romances were written by women. and so is that a genre that you like to read or?
Yeah, I love queer romance in general. I would say one of my favorite queer writers, though, and if you haven't read, you should, TJ Klune. Have you read? Okay, you've got to read TJ Klune. He's amazing. I do try to look for more queer voices by queer men. I think it is very important to read queer romance by queer men. But I do also, obviously, there's a lot of queer women that Rachel Reed, like, huge in the space right now. So it's kind of a weird discourse. Certainly, I don't kind of like the narrative where we're almost forcing people to out themselves. I think that's gotten a little extreme. Yeah. Because I feel like own voices is important, but we shouldn't push someone to come out before they're ready. I think that's kind of a weird space to be in. But yeah, TJ Klune is one of my absolute favorite writers of all in general, but amazing, amazing queer romance.
Yeah. What else do you enjoy picking up? And
so I just finished a reread of Great Gatsby. I'm on this, I tend to get on like kicks of things where it's like there's one thing and then I go, which your book, Clever Clever Woman, has then made me go through Hamnet, and now I'm reading the book for that. So I like.
Did you see the film?
Yes.
Yes. Should I read it?
I don't know.
I was
it's tough.
fully traumatized writing Hamnet's death. And
it's very tough. It's great, but it's very, very tough to handle.
And how does the book compare to the film?
I haven't finished the book yet. So I'm very much like, I like finding a thing and then trying to read a lot of those things. So I just recently got the opportunity to see Gatsby on Broadway. And so then after I watched the show, I was like, well, I need to reread the book. It's been years and years. And then just last week, there's a queer reimagining of Gatsby that came out. It's I'm going to have to look it up because I don't, The Great Disillusionment of Nick and Jay, I believe is the.
Oh, what a good name.
Yeah. So it's a queer reimagining set in Harlem. It just came out last Tuesday, and so I just ordered it, and I'm very excited to start that one too.
We'll have to put that one on the shelf and on all of the lists. We need to get a list together of all the books mentioned on the podcast because it's, very much like, when people watch Rory Gilmore and they're like, all right, all I need to read, all of the books that Rory Gilmore read in the show. And then it's like, okay, well, in this podcast, you've got all of these avid readers and writers talking about what they've read that got them writing, and I think that'd be wonderful. So so that one I have on my list. And then also MJ Hughes, she's a Oklahoma author. I just picked up her book 2 in her series of her hockey romance, and it's not queer, but I'm so excited to read that one. I'm trying to, every time I go to these events as a table, I also walk the room, and I spend more money some of the times than I make because I want to buy all these books. There's so many good Oklahoma books. So MJ Hughes, great Oklahoma author. I'm very excited. And then Jess, I'm excited to start that one too. Her new book. Just what a delight. I'm really excited about Side Quests and Shenanigans because an opportunity to kind of force myself to write. We're doing, with our improv group, The Artist's Way. We have a lot of writers, sketch writers and fiction writers, but we're about to do that. And so I'm making time for myself to get writing again. And so I
think it goes back to, like we said, to the parameters of forcing yourself into these little boxes sometimes, like giving yourself a prompt then allows you to be creative with no pressure. And I think that's really exciting that she's creating a community around that idea.
It's really exciting. I love it. I've been asking everybody, and this is where I've cried a lot of times, what has been most surprising or interesting for you really coming into the literary community?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Maybe surprising would just be how quickly people are willing to take you into the community, I think. And I think that's the same too with the Tulsa queer community. I think before I was as involved, there was a lot of fear of, I don't deserve to be here. I haven't earned my place. I think a lot of writers feel that way, especially before you've published anything. You're like, well, I can't hang out with these people who've published books. They're real deal and I'm not. And so I think just how immediate when you go to someone in the writing community in Tulsa and you're like, even if you say the words, I want to write a book, it's very quickly oh, you've got to meet this person. You've got to meet this person. And then people start connecting you to other people. And I think you worry that it's going to be cliquish or, maybe that you aren't going to be allowed in certain spaces. But every writing event that I've been to, every a writers group, I'm involved in Witty Writers. We meet On Mondays, we meet at Shades of Brown. And I always encourage, like, I post on my social media, like, even if you haven't written anything and you just want to start writing, it's a great space to bounce ideas off of other writers. Because that's the thing, too. Writing is solitary. Like, when you're doing the work, you're by yourself. And it can be very isolating if you don't push yourself to join the community and go to these events where you get to meet other writers. And so I feel like just the acceptance of it has been, and I feel like by saying that's surprising makes it feel like I assume they'd all be like assholes, which is not that's not what I mean. I think it was like my own reservations of just pushing yourself.
I think the idea of like the person secluded in the corner, like if they go out in public, they're in the corner of the coffee shop with their laptop and their notes and they're, you know, kind of closed off, I think makes it look like writing is this very solitary thing. And so I wonder if people just don't even look for the community and then it just slips out. And then you're like, oh, you said the magic secret words, I write, or I want to be a writer, and you're put in there. I've got someone in my phone who stopped at my table at the author bash. And she was like, yeah, I dog sit, but I really want to write a book. And I'd gotten her number to be a dog sitter, but I put her in there as like dog sitter and future author. And she was like, what? And I was like, you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
It may take years. It may take so long. It may take 1,000 single chapters in your hard drive of false starts on a book, but you're gonna do it.
real version.
This is the one. Or like, oh, I really liked the story I did, and then I wrote a chapter and I was like, scrap it. But it'll happen. And, you know, it's the speakeasy of the literary community is just, I want to do this. And then boom, you're in. And despite it being the actual act of writing, such a solitary internal, I'm just scooping out my brain onto a page. Everything around it is so community focused, and you really just, you can't make it happen the way that you probably want to have it happen without being open to the community and the community folding you in. And everybody is like jumping at the chance to make each other successful and spending all of our earnings at book fairs on each other.
Yeah.
I think it's just this really exciting and beautiful opportunity. And, you know,
I think that was kind of a realization for me of like walking through a bookstore, even like here you looking at these books. None of these books were created by one person. Even like if you self-publish and you design the cover and you do it, like there's so many people that are involved in the project as a whole, which I think surprised me because in school, when I went to school for creative writing, that was all craft. We didn't talk a lot about the business, which I wish they would talk more about writing as a business with creative writing majors because I had no idea what that process looked like until after I graduated. But when you start to get into the business side of writing, everything is touched by other people. And like, not only in a sense that you have to learn how to let go of some of that control sometimes, which we're not used to, but also just knowing that no matter what you're doing, someone has been there and done it before you. So you can find that person, you can ask them, and you can say, how did you deal with this? How did you handle this? And there have been so many authors, even like with Pride, that was my first book, that when I've reached out to them, even like, you know, traditionally published people that are like what I would consider big time, made it, that have just been so kind of like, if we're on a list together, then they'll send it and they'll be like, hey, this is so cool. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know, that kind of a thing where you're like, whoa, where everybody who gets to where they are has been in these other steps. And so we've all kind of worked together and seen what it's like to get to where you want to go. And I feel like that's what builds the community. It's like we are all struggling through this process that is really difficult. And so I think it's like that connection. What is it, like trauma bonding? Where like, I know I've been there, I've done that. It's awful. Like querying and editing and all these things. It's like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I think it's just been really encouraging.
So that made me think about, I got to talk a little bit to Rattling Good Yarns, which was the publisher of Pride. And
yeah, Ian's his editor there. He's awesome.
I love that. Their whole focus is queer stories. When you were querying Pride, did you like, what was the intention behind that? How did we land on Rattling Good Yarns?
Yeah, I queried. So I've always only looked for agents who have either are identify as queer or have that as projects that they've worked with, because that's so important to me. And surprisingly, this is what I kind of learned. And I don't know if I'm telling a story out of turn. I probably shouldn't say this, but there was a lot of, I think, agents that I queried that based on the responses I got, I started to kind of wonder like, oh, is this like something you put on your website to make you look a certain way or progressive and you're not really necessarily supportive of that? Because like, for instance, there was an agent who responded to me and saying, there's no room on the shelf for this book. And when I read that, I was like, oh, this is the game we're playing, I guess. And so a lot of that I think was kind of eye-opening of like, even an industry that I do think has done a lot of work to focus on BIPOC creators and queer voices is still so far behind where it needs to be. And so for me, I saw, I was looking through queer small presses. And when I saw what Rattling Good Yarns is doing, I was like, okay, this is like what they do. And I think you have such a advantage when they know who they're selling to, they know who the buyers are, they have relationships with queer bookstores. Like sometimes the smaller you go, the more focused you can be, and it's a huge advantage. And so then I got to speak with Ian, and it was almost like the first time when Ian and I spoke, I was like, is this guy real? Like, is this, because I'm so skeptical of everything. I'm a horrible cynic, but he's like the greatest. He's so encouraging and helpful. There have been times where, and again, I probably shouldn't tell these stories, where I call him and I'm just like frustrated and upset. And then he'll go into like mentor mode and just coach me as like, you're a young writer, let's figure this out kind of a thing. And so that's, again, goes back to community of just finding people who are in your corner, even just to vent to when you're like, I don't understand how this is all working. And they're like, listen, this is what happens sometimes. So, yeah, it's been a huge, huge help to have that. And just know that I love the idea that I get to, when I'm at events and I'm selling books, I get to then promote them as a press too, because it's like, I love supporting people who are doing things the right way.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them too. Ian was such an advocate. He was excited that we'd reached out, and then not only was like, all right, here's how we order Sam's book, but also if you enjoyed that, here's a few other people that we think that you should buy. And then, you know, they were out of stock of one book that I wanted. And so he was like, but if you wanted that and you liked Sam, here's some other options. What can we send you? How can we support you? You know, he was checking in. He was like, hey, I was watching the tracking number and it should get delivered today. And, you know, I just, having people advocate for you like that is super powerful and wonderful. And
yeah, definitely.
What a treat. And so
that's why I would encourage authors, if they're trying to explore traditional is such a wide range of options. And I think, you know, if you find a small press who does a specific thing, like I said, sometimes that really can be an advantage of like, that is what they focus on and that's what they're really known for. So I would encourage authors to look for, it doesn't have to always just be self-publishing or huge 5 trad. It can be, there are some ways in between of like looking for small presses or looking for like Siam's a local press. And they did the chapbook. So definitely. Final Words is with Trueborn, and they're primarily horror, which I was really worried about.
Another grief book in a horror community. I
was a little worried at first. Christina's the editor there, and I was like, are you sure that this will be a fit? And she was like, yeah, because it's this, again, it's the grief, it's the loss, it's the fear of humanity and all of these things. And so I was like, they have a lot of other books that are more like psychological, which is what this kind of is. And so I was like, okay, again, like that's a very specific press that does a specific thing, but I feel like sometimes that comes with its own advantages.
I love it. Is there anything else that you would like to add? I could talk for hours, but
I want to know what you're reading right now.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm reading Grady Hendrix's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls.
Okay.
And then I'm waiting on an arc from Indie Reader. I can't remember what I asked them for. I think it was a psychological thriller. And then I have also been reading through You're the Problem, It's You, which is a queer Regency romance.
Okay.
It's the second in a series. I wish I could remember the author. But she wrote a book that was Don't Want You Like a Best Friend.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Emma. Oh, I think it's Emma. So bad I can't think of the name.
Emma Albin.
Yeah.
Yes. So that one was.
Yeah, that's on my TBR.
I really enjoyed it. I think my one struggle with it is it's written in omniscient third person present tense,
Oh, interesting.
which is pretty unusual, especially for the books that I've read. It's a lot of if it's omniscient, it's past tense, and like the pacing of it made it really fast in a way that was a little dizzying. But then once I got oriented, it took me maybe halfway through to get kind of like, okay, this is how she writes. And I really love the characters and I love the story and I'm ready to and then once I got through that, I was like, all right, perfect. And you know what? The chaos, the series is like something about mischief. And I think that writing style lends to this chaos. Of the two primary characters, Gwen and Beth, are very chaotic and very, everything's rapid and intense and big, and they're young women, so like everything is rapid and intense and big when you're that age. And so like watching this romance bloom and then watch them meddle with like the second book is like an enemies to lovers kind of vibe. And it's just a delight. And I'm a Regency romance person. I eat up Bridgerton. It's killing me inside that I haven't watched season 4 yet, but
That's funny.
So those are what I'm looking at right now.
Very nice. I love writing chaos. Obviously I feel like Final Words is a lot of chaos. It's the joy of just getting to go all over the place on the page is very fun.
Yeah, it's so freeing. Just make intense things happen. I love it. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us on Paper Girls. Our next guest is going to be Kayla from Kanara Books. Okay. Kayla's opening a case here. She does pop-ups around Tulsa, and then she's going to take over a case for at least the next 3 months to share her selections that reflect BIPOC voices.
Oh, very exciting.
And so we're doing a little partnership, but she also pops up around Tulsa all the time. So it's going to be a good time talking about her journey into Tulsa and filling in a space that has lost its representation in the bookstore community. So very exciting. Thank you so much for listening to Paper Girl, and we'll entertain you next week.